ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय राधिकायै प्रियात्मने श्रीश्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त नारायण गोस्वामिनिति नामिने। श्रीकृष्ण लीला कथने सुदक्षं औदार्य माधुर्य गुणैशयुक्तं वरं वरेण्यं पुरुषं महान्तं श्रीनारायणं त्वं शिरसा नमामि। हृदण्डिनां भक्तशिरोमणिं च श्रीकृष्णपदाब्जधृतये हृदि चैतन्यलीलामृतसारसारं नारायणं त्वं सततं प्रपद्ये। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्याय नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। श्याम सुंदर शिखंड शेखर स्मेरहास मुरली मनोहर राधिका रसिक मां कृपा निधे स्वप्रिया चरण किंकरीं कुरु। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। तवैवास्मि ना जीवामि त्वया विना इति विज्ञाय राधे तन्नय माम चरनन्तिके। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। भक्त्या विहीनापराधलक्ष्यै क्षिप्ताश्च कामादितरङ्गमध्यै कृपामयि त्वं शरणं प्रपन्ना वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। So first of all, I would like to offer my unlimited obeisances unto the divine lotus feet of my most worshipable spiritual master, His Divine Grace Sril Bhakti Vedant Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My unlimited obeisances unto the divine lotus feet of Sril Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Arupanuga Guru Varga, and then to all the assembled devotees. So last time we had started with the first question that Sannyasi Mahashay had asked from Babaji Maharaj. And his question was that what is the real religion of the Jiva, and why there are so many different religions in the world and everyone has a different conception. So that time Babaji Maharaj explained that the eternal intrinsic nature of the jiva, of the living entity, is his eternal nature. And when that gets transformed because of some reason, then it becomes what he called nimittic, the transformed nature, which is not its true nature. And because of that misconception, we see so many different religions in the world. So now we will continue from there. But before we start, as every time, I would like to start with a short quiz that will help us get a better understanding of some of the points that we discussed last time. So if you all can take a couple of minutes and answer these questions, and then we will proceed. So they're just 4 questions, and 3 of them are just yes/no questions. So So please try and answer the questions. I think all of you have that on your screens. So, he had used the word vastu. Vastu means object. Okay, so I think I don't know who has not answered, but we can, I think, stop here. If anyone else is in the process of answering, I think let's give another few seconds. Okay, so I'm just going to end this. Thanks everyone for answering, and let's just see what the correct answers are. So the first question was that the word vastu refers to the three fundamental principles: Bhagwan, the Supreme Lord, the living entity, and the illusory energy. And the answer was yes or no. So the correct answer is yes. And this is explained in the response to the first question by Babaji Mahashaya, that these three are fundamental principles because they're distinct, even though among all of them, the Supreme Lord is the source of everything else, but still, these are all three considered as separate fundamental principles, okay, or vastu. So the next question was, and when the inherent nature of an object is distorted and stays in that distorted state for a very long time, does that this distorted nature become its eternal nature? So the correct answer is no. And this is the one of the most important points that Babaji Mahashaya explained in the response to the first question, that no matter what, our eternal nature never changes, even though it gets transformed. And we had discussed the example of the water, which is liquid in nature. When it is frozen, it becomes solid ice. So it may be kept in the freezer for a very, very long time. But no matter, even if it's kept there for 100 years, right? It is still not going to lose its liquidity. So when that cause is taken away, the cause, which means the freezing temperature, is taken away, and that ice is kept outside at room temperature, even after 100 years, it will still become liquid. So the answer to this question is no, that the inherent nature of the living entity, see, this is an important point to understand, because if our nature changes, then there is no hope of us going back to our true spiritual nature and become liberated from the material world, because we have been in this world since time immemorial. So because our nature, our true nature, which we are not aware of right now, does not change even after being in this material for such a long time, therefore there is a hope that we can get liberated. So the answer to this question again is no, it does not change. So the next question, everyone who answered got it right, and this is the Achintya Bheda Bhed, that the living entity is one in spiritual nature with the Supreme, and in that sense they are one, but they're also different because of the living entity being atomic is incomplete, and therefore it gets controlled by Maya. But Krishna, being infinite, he is complete, and he does not get impacted by Maya. On the contrary, he is the controller of Maya. So the answer to this question is the first, which is yes. And then finally, the last question was, who is the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrit? And that is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. So he is quoted in in the book in the answer to the first question. So, so now if you have copies of Jaiva Dharma with you, it will certainly be helpful. So last time Babaji Mahasaya was explaining, and we discussed the first part of this very important verse that is considered as the root verse of our Siddhanta or our philosophy. So that one says, and let me share with everyone, this is Jivera Swarup Hai Krishner Nityadas. That is the eternal nature of the living entity is that, or this is the true nature, that he is an eternal servant of Krishna. So this is the first line that Babaji Mahasaya had explained. And so I will read the last couple of lines in his response. And he said that the interrelationship between Krishna and the Jiva is natural. Why? Because Krishna is the attractor and the Jivas are attracted. Krishna is the supreme ruler and the Jivas are ruled. Krishna is the observer and the Jivas are observed. Krishna is the supreme powerful, whereas the Jivas has no power. So he says, therefore, the eternal nature or the swabhav or the religion or the dharma of the living entity is Krishna Dasya, which means eternal service and obedience to Krishna. So this is the first line he had explained. Now he explains the second line of this, which we also briefly discussed, that Krishner Tatastha Shakti Bhed Abhed Prakash, that the living entities are manifested from the Tatastha Shakti, the marginal potency, and they are one and different simultaneously from the Lord. So he will explain this in more detail now. So first he says that that Krishna is a reservoir of multifarious energies. So in the scriptures it says Parasya Shaktihi Vividhev Shruyate, that supreme absolute has many different types of shaktis or energies, and that they are in three main categories. So the first one is his complete shakti or his internal potency that manifests the spiritual world. And then there is an external energy which is also called the Bahiranga Shakti. It is also called the Achit Shakti because it manifests the inanimate world. Between these two, there is another one which he explains. So he says that his complete potency is perceived in the manifestation of the spiritual world. Similarly, his marginal potency is observed in the manifestation of the Jiva. This special potency is known as Tatastha Shakti. It accomplishes the function of the finite world. So he says that this marginal potency, so one point here to understand is, and we will discuss this later also in Jaiva Dharma, but here the difference that is being made is between the energetic and the energy, the Supreme Lord and his energies. Even though they are non-different, but they're also distinctly different. Just like my eyes see. And the two parts of the eye, there is this eyeballs and then the potency to see. So both have to be there. In one sense, they are inseparable, but without the potency to see, the eyes cannot see. So without that Shakti, Krishna is not, it becomes impersonal. So it is because of these Shaktis which are not different from him. But the point here is that they are distinctly separate. And this is the difference from the impersonalistic philosophy, where they do not make the differentiation between the Shakti and the Shaktiman, the energetic and the energy. They say it is all one and the same. And therefore, their concept is of merging in the Supreme. But that philosophy has a lot of incongruencies, a lot of problems with it, which we will discuss later also in Jaiva Dharma. But here the main thing is that there is the energetic Krishna and then he has multifarious energies. So he says that this marginal potency has a very special position. What is that special position? He says that this marginal potency creates an entity that exists between the animate objects and the inanimate objects, and which can maintain a relationship with both the spiritual and the material worlds. So, there is this material world, and then there is the spiritual world. They are completely opposite to each other. In the material world, everything has birth and death. Something appears, and then in our case, the bodies, they grow, become old, and then they die. We suffer from diseases and so many different kind of other miseries. And then there are all these inanimate objects, inert objects, which have no feeling, no sensitivity. So they have, because they're not conscious. So this is how the material world is. In the spiritual world, there is no effect of time. So there is no birth. And because there is no birth, there is no death. Their bodies don't grow old. They don't suffer from diseases. There is no misery. And nothing there is inanimate. Even the trees, even the stones, even the bed that Krishna lies on, everything in that spiritual world is Sachidanandamaya, is spiritual. So these are two completely opposite realities. And just like in this world, we have no understanding or no experience of the spiritual world. We, of course, hear about it, but at the same time, we can't conceive of it. Similarly, in the spiritual world, those who are living there, those eternally liberated personalities, they have no conception of the material world. They don't even know that this world exists. So, so in between these two totally opposite realities, there is another one, which is the Tatastha Shakti. And the special characteristic of this potency or the marginal potency is that it can be under the influence of either the spiritual or the material reality. He says it can maintain a relationship with both of them. So the example here is a good example, but will help understand, just like there is oil and water. So oil and water don't mix together, right? So because they're totally different chemical properties. But now if you put something which is called a surfactant, when you put that, then it can help combine the oil and water, and it creates what is called an emulsion. Why? Because the surfactant has such a chemical structure that it can connect with the water molecules on one side and also with the oil molecules on the other side. So in that sense, this Tatastha Shakti can come under the influence of either of the two realities, the spiritual and the material world. So he says that although the jiva is an animate spiritual particle, he is capable of a relationship with inanimate matter because of the influence of the divine potency. So even though we are originally totally spiritual, our soul is absolutely pure, but because of being part of this marginal potency, we have the possibility of coming under the influence of the material energy. So he says that this why it is called marginal, as many of you must have heard before, because it is like the tata. So between the water and the land, there is a line, right, which is called the bank, or in Sanskrit or Hindi, it is called tat. So it is just a fine line. Now it can sometimes come under the water, and it is sometimes can come under the land. But that line is called tat because it can be under either one of them. So he says, therefore, the jiva's nature is spiritual, but still his composition is such that he can become controlled by dull matter as well. And he says, therefore, the conditioned soul is not beyond all connection with matter, unlike the jivas in the spiritual domain. So he is explaining that there are two types of living entities: one who are liberated, and that means they never came to the material world. And then there are conditioned living entities who are in this world. And he says that uh, just like the those entities who are in the spiritual world, they have no connection with matter. But these entities that are in the material world and came from the Tatastha Shakti, they are also connected, can be connected with the dull matter. So he says that, but at the same time, we are distinct from the dull matter because the soul is not matter. The soul is spiritual. It is our body which is composed of the material elements, not the soul. But since the jiva is by nature different from both the purely spiritual entities and the dull matter, he is classified as a separate principle. So what he's trying to explain here, that this jiva, the living entity, us, or for that matter, everything that is living, we are neither completely like Krishna, like in the spiritual world, because we have the ability to be influenced by material energy. Because those who are in the spiritual world never get influenced by the material energy. And things that are in the material energy, that is dead matter, it does not have any consciousness. So it is also different from us. So therefore, the living entities or the jivas are considered a separate tattva. So this was one of the questions that also I had. Therefore, it is also considered as a separate principle. So he is explaining this way, that there is an eternal distinction between the Supreme Lord as well as the jiva. Now, the jiva gets controlled by Maya, whereas the Supreme Lord, he is the controller of the Maya, he is the supreme ruler. So next he explains that these three, Bhagwan, the Jiva, and Maya, the three of them are real and eternal, meaning we cannot say that there was a point in time that they were created. See, this is where there's limitation of our uh, our intelligence and limitation of the language and our experience, because we live in a world which is relative. We live in a world where there is a start and end. The day starts, the day ends. Life begins, life ends. The body takes birth, the body ends. So there is start and end. So because of that, it is difficult to conceive of a reality where none of this exists. Because there is no influence of time, everything is eternal. In this world, it is not eternal because there is influence of time. So he says that they are, all three of these are real. So this is again a difference from the impersonalist philosophy, which we'll also discuss later on. And I think as we go along, it is important to understand, because a lot of time people get confused by these two philosophies, the impersonalist and the personalist. So here he's clearly stating, like the impersonalists say, that the world is not real. It is like an illusion, it is like a dream. But it is not unreal in this, it is real in the sense that it exists, right? It is what you see in a dream is also not something that does not exist. You never see and something in a dream. It might be a combination of a few things which you see in the real world, but you will never see something in a dream that does not exist. So this world exists, but it is unreal in the sense that it is temporary, but it is real. Why? Because it is manifested from the external energy of Krishna. And everything that Krishna's energies manifest is not unreal. It is real, and it is also eternal, means it does not come to an end. So the creation always continues, even though there may be pralay or devastation. And once, as the creation take place, Lord Mahavishnu breathes out, multiple universes are created. He breathes in, everything comes, is destroyed. But again, the manifestation takes place. So the material energy or the Maya is also eternal. But he says among these three also, Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. This is from Kat Upanishad, where he says among these eternal also, Krishna, he is the supreme eternal, the supremely conscious. So this is where we have to, as we progress spiritually, these understandings become clearer. So while we cannot say that there was a beginning of us, because if we were created at some point, then we would also come to an end, right? So in that sense, we are eternal, but at the same time, we are all manifested from Krishna. So at this point, we should just try and leave it there, because with our material calculations or understanding, it is hard to conceive. But the point again to understand is that the Jiva is also eternal. He never merges with the Supreme and loses his identity. So he says that Jiva, therefore, by nature is both an eternal servant of Krishna and is also the representation of his marginal potency. So, therefore, so now he has explained. So go back to that verse. Tatastha Shakti is explained that the Jiva is the Tatastha Shakti of Krishna, the marginal potency. And then now he is explaining Bhed Abhed Prakash. They are simultaneously one and different, which he has also explained. But in the conclusion, he's stating again that they are both different and non-different. Why? Because the Jiva is subject to Maya, whereas Krishna is the controller of Maya. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Daivihi Esha Gunmayi, Mam Maya Duratyaya. He clearly states that this illusory energy, the Maya, Daivihi Esha Gunmayi, it is of three modes of material nature. And he says, Mam Maya. Mam means mine. So it is my Shakti, my potency, which influences the living entity. So it says so there, in that sense, because we are controlled, we are non-different. And the reason we get controlled, the reason we become under the influence of Maya is because of our atomic nature, right? We are so small, just like a drop of water can easily be blown away if just by little air, it can be blown. But the ocean cannot be blown, right? So with your or any amount of air, you can't blow the ocean. But ocean can turn the ships, it can turn things around. So because of the difference in their size, and again a material example, and because Krishna is the controller, he does not get influenced by Maya, but the Jiva gets influenced by Maya. And this is another difference from the impersonalistic theory, and a very important principle to understand. And again, we will discuss this later in Jaiva Dharma, where they say that Brahman, which they compare as the all-pervading effulgence, like the sky, it gets covered by Maya, which is compared with a cloud. So just like cloud covers a part of the sky, then it becomes the Jiva. So when that Maya or the covering of the cloud is removed, then the Jiva becomes one with Brahman, means we merge in him and become one, and there is no differentiation. So just like the cloud, when removes that part of the sky, becomes part of the sky, right? Now see what the problem with this thing is. If something can cover Brahman, that means Maya is more powerful than Brahman or that supreme, right? So how is that possible? Because then Maya becomes supreme. So here, because it is a Shakti, it is a potency of Krishna, it never controls him, because the creator is always more powerful than the creator. Nowadays, of course, there's a lot of discussion that one day the computers will control us because of AI. But I can tell you that will not happen, because the creator, will never be always, now they may be able to control some people, but their original creators, they will never be controlling, because they are programmed in such a way that they cannot control you, right? So again, a crude example, but the point to understand is that because he's a Shakti, Maya is a Shakti of Krishna, that's why it doesn't control. So again, a very important difference between the impersonalist philosophy and the Vaishnav or the Dvait philosophy. So he says that in the, so they are one uh, in their qualities, but at the same time different because of their quantity. And but the jiva is a special potency of Bhagwan. Now here he mentions a very, so he has explained in this chapter that there is oneness and difference with the Supreme. But an important point he now explains is that anytime there is oneness and difference between two things, then it is the difference that is predominating, right? So while the oneness is there in the sense that we are same as Krishna in quality, Sat Chit Anand, but the difference is the one which is predominating. Because if oneness was the more dominant factor, that means that we can never be serving him as in the mood of servitorship, right? So that distinction, that eternal distinction, he says that takes prominence, not the oneness. But because the oneness is there, that's why we can have a relationship with him. Because if we were matter, then we could not have a relationship with him. But because we are one in quality, we can have a relationship. But at the same time, it is the distinction that is prominent. So, and then he explains that another part of this verse was that when did the jiva, the living entity, become separated from the Supreme Lord? So that is when that aversion to the Lord, that we want to enjoy independent of him, then the living entity comes in the material world. And he says that there is no history of this in the material time, because in the material time, it is from the time that when we came into the under the influence of the material energy. So within the material time, there is no history of the living entity having fallen here, because from the point we fall in the material times is already started. So the point here, what he's explaining is, that's why it is called anadi, because if there was a history of us, so let's say the time started at a billion years ago, and it was 900 million years ago that we were fallen into this material world, then we could say there was a starting point. He says no, it is from the beginning, it is like that. Therefore it is called anadi. Anadi means which has no beginnings. Therefore it is called anadir bahimukh. From this time immemorial, we have been in this material world. So, and because of that association with the illusory energy, our eternal nature of loving relationship with the Lord gets transformed, where we start thinking that we are the controllers. So in this world, we all have that tendency, right? In small or big, we all want to be controllers. We want to be enjoyers of our property, of our wealth, of our beauty, of our power, of our subjects. So many different ways, in gross and subtle ways, we have the tendency to control. And this controlling tendency is what that keeps away us from full surrender. So he says that because of this temporary nature which has happened due to the living entity falling in the material world, there are so many different types of religions that have been manifested. So, and he says that, and therefore different people describe also in with divergent opinions. So after saying this, after explaining this, so he explained what is Nitya Dharam, the eternal religion, and then he explained what is nimitic or temporary religion. And then after that, Babaji, he stops, Paramhans Das Babaji, and he starts chanting on his beads. And then Sannyasi Mahashay also, he has heard a lot of philosophy, lot of Siddhanta. He wants to meditate on it and assimilate what he has heard. And then he bows down at his feet and says that if I have any questions after meditating on what you have narrated, I will ask those questions tomorrow. So with this, the first chapter of Jaiva Dharma is concluded. So let's stop here before we start the next chapter and see if anyone has any questions on what that we have discussed so far.
Question.
Yes, you have a question, Prabhu? Yeah, I think you have written in the. So is that a question, Ashok Prabhu? Okay, but that's just a statement, right? So that's good. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
When we were talking about the quiz and you spoke about the eternal nature, I just posted this.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So Sam, did you have a question?
Yeah, so the Jiva, is it that the Jiva never fell, or that we have no history of it falling? Is it a distorted energy from the beginning?
Yes, so those jivas who fall into this material world, they were never in the spiritual world, if that's what your question is. So right from the beginning, those of us who are conditioned in the material world, that conditioning has been from the very beginning itself. Is that was your question, or?
Yes, that answers it. So there's no, well, it kind of makes me question the going back part. Like if the jiva never existed in those of us who are conditioned jivas that never existed in the spiritual realm, and always existed here in the material one, then the question kind of becomes, then what is this reference to going back?
Yes. So see, so very good question. So because by nature we are eternal, right? So therefore, there is all possibility for us to go back to the spiritual world. And that he starts actually explaining in the good point, because he explains that in the next chapter, in the beginning itself, a little differently, but that would answer your question. Because if we were eternally doomed, right, we would not talk about going back. But because we are actually eternally a part of the Supreme Lord, so once that illusion, the covering of illusion, is removed, right, by the process of devotional service, then one becomes qualified to go back to the spiritual world. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita multiple places that one who follows this process, he comes back to the spiritual world. That one who worships me, he comes back to the spiritual world. Yad gatva nanyavartante tadham paramamama. And he also says that once you reach there, then you never come back to the material world. So the fact that we are here does not mean that we can not go back, or we can. So we of course say go back. It seems like we came from there. So it's again the limitation of the language. But yes, we can go to the spiritual world. Okay. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yes,
Prabhuji. So Swarglok is also part of spiritual world, or is it is it only our lok which is material and rest all are spiritual? Why I'm asking, because always we hear Indra is always in Moh and in Maya and all that. So I'm trying to understand.
No, good point. So the Swarglok, or the heaven, is in the material world. So that's not part of the spiritual. So there are 14 planetary systems. So this is Bhumandal. Then above this is Bhuvalok, Swarlok, Maharlok, Taplok, Janlok, Brahmlok. And then below that is Tal, Talatal, Rasatal, like this. There are 7 planetary systems below this. So heaven is not even the highest planetary system in this material world, but it is part of the material world. And even the planet of Lord Brahma, which is the highest planet, is also part of the material world. And it also gets destroyed when Lord Brahma's life is over. So therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Abhram Bhuvanat Loka Punravartina Arjuna, that in this material world, from this planet all the way to the planet of Brahma, these are the places where constantly birth and death takes place. So unless one goes out of this universal covering, so this universe has a covering, and all these planets are within that universal covering. So it is not eternal. The heaven is not eternal. Okay. Okay. So we'll start with the, we have some time, so we'll start with the next chapter. So in the next chapter, the next morning, Sannyasi Thakur, he now wants to ask some questions from Babaji, because he had some further questions, but Babaji was doing his chanting, so he didn't get an opportunity. And then they both went out together for begging alms, and that is called Madhukari. So Madhukari means, in like Madhu means honey. So just like the bumblebees, they go to many flowers and collect little bit pollen from each flower, and then they come and to their honeycomb, and they make honey. So these renounced personalities, those who are at the stage of Paramhansa, and this was the tradition in the Vedic, not Vedic times, and even like 300-400 years ago, and very recently as well, that these saintly people will just go to a few homes and stay at one home just for a few minutes while they are, 3 times they will ask for alms, and if someone gives, they will take it, otherwise they'll go away. So they will collect small quantities of food, maybe flour, some vegetables from different homes, and if they, whatever they get, they will cook and honor that prasadam, and completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. So they came after collecting alms, and then later in the day, Sannyasi Mahashay approaches Babaji Maharaj, and asks a question. Before that, actually, Babaji himself asked him that, have you meditated on what we discussed yesterday? And what if you have any questions regarding that subject? So then he asked the question, a very interesting question. He says that you explained to me that the jiva is infinitesimal, it is atomic in nature. Then how is it possible that something which is so atomic, that its religion can be eternal and it can be complete and pure? And also, if the natural function of the jiva is formed at the time it is constituted, how can it be eternal? Because if something is constituted at a particular time, that means there was a beginning to that dharma. So how can it be eternal? So he asks these two questions. So then Paramhans Das Babaji, praying at the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he answers. And he says that being atomic or being infinitesimal is just one characteristic of the living entity. It does not define it completely. So for example, when we define something, we define, so again, taking a drop of water, we may define that it is small, but that's not the complete description of all that the drop is. It is also liquid, it has other qualities. So he says minuteness is only a trait by which the living entity is identified. Now, Sri Krishna Chandra is the one and only infinite substance, and the jivas are his innumerable atomic particles. And then he gives an example. He says that just like the fire, so when the fire is burning, from the fire, many small sparks, they come out. right? So many sparks. So he says, if a single sparks come out from a fire, now those sparks individually, when they're coming out, may not look very potent, right? The fire is huge. It is producing a lot of heat, lot of energy, is burning things down. But these individual sparks that are coming out, it appears that they don't have any potency. But he says, if a single spark has enough fuel, it can kindle a blazing fire that will incinerate the whole world, right? So what he's saying is that the potency is there in that spark as well. So we hear of all these forest fires in California and other places, huge fires. How do they start? They start from a spark. So it is not that the spark, because it is so small in size, doesn't have the potency. So the potency is there. He says, similarly, even a single jiva can inundate the entire world with love if he attains Shri Krishna Chandra, who is the real object of love. So an important point to understand, what he's saying is that the potency is there. The potency is there in each and every one of us to do something amazing. And he says that each jiva has the potency to inundate the world with pure love of Krishna, only when he is able to connect with him. There is a great Vaishnavacharya, and he, Vrindavan Das Thakur, and he, in a bhajan, he writes, Brahmanda tarite shakti ei jane jane, that every follower of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has the capability to deliver. Brahmanda Tarite Shakti Dhare Jane Jane. Every one of them have the capability of delivering not just few people or one country or one planet. He says Brahmand, meaning the entire universe. So that potential is there. And we see, in modern times also, that how our acharyas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he appeared himself at a time when India was under the British rule, and Indians themselves had no idea of what Sanatan Dharma is, even the understanding of this Vaishnav principles. As I was telling in the first class, that he could not even find a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So at those times, simply by the power of his writings, he was able to revive and revolutionize the philosophical world and establish the principles of Gaudiya Vaishnavism as enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then came Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who again, with no means and nothing, he spread it all over India and even sent people outside. And one of his disciples, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, came to the Western world and he spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So we see, and then our Gurudev, he came and amazingly did the same wonderful thing of preaching all over the world. So these are great acharyas who are eternal associates of the Lord. So because of that connection with Krishna, they have the potency to inundate the whole world with pure love. So this is what he's saying, that the jiva has that potency. That potency is latent because right now it has not been come into the connection with the real object. So he says, the infinitesimal conscious jiva cannot exhibit the natural development of a spiritual function as long as he fails to contact the real object of that function. So that function is what? Love. So that eternal function is the love of Krishna. But till we come into contact, and how that contact happens, that contact happens through the association with devotees, right? So unless we associate with devotees, and that's the power. So the one and the only way of making spiritual progress is to have association of pure devotees. Lord Kapila in Srimad Bhagavatam, he is saying to Mother Devahuti, Satam prasangat mama virya samvido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana katha Tat Joshnat Ashu Apavarga Vartamani Shraddha Rati Bhakti Anukramishati. So this is from the third canto, chapter 25, verse 25. So he's saying that Satam Prasangat Mama Virya Samvido, in the association of devotees, when one hears my pastimes, the glories of my name, my qualities, my pastimes, so Nam, Roop, Guna, Leela, my transcendental form, and these kathas, these glorifications, he says, Hritkarana Rasayanaha Katha, that these are very, very pleasing to the heart and the ears because they are full of sweetness, because everything about Krishna is sweet. So Tat Joshnat Ashu Apavargavartamani, then Shraddharati Bhakti Anukramishati. So very quickly, then he develops faith, then faith develops to attachment, and then pure loving devotional service. So this is the process of contact with our natural function. So he says, till that happens, our potency is in a latent state. But when the process of bhakti starts, then that potency starts blossoming, right? And the jiva's spiritual form starts manifesting. So he says, in reality, it is only when the jiva is in connection with his object that the identity of its dharma becomes apparent. Then he says, what is the, so he says, what is the nitya dharma, eternal constitutional function of the jiva? You must examine this question carefully. Transcendental love for Krishna is the jiva's nitya dharma. The constitutional nature of the jiva is consciousness, which is transcendental to mundane matter. His eternal function is divine love. So one very important point he's saying is what is the eternal function? The eternal function is divine love. Gurudev would say that God is love and love is God. So our goal is not even Krishna. Our goal is that pure love for him. Because without pure love for him, that even though the Lord may come in front of us, we will not understand him. We will not recognize him. Right? And there are so many different such pastimes in the scriptures. And one I was narrating yesterday, that before the battle of Mahabharat was going to start, the battle of Kurukshetra, so both Duryodhan and Arjun, they went to Krishna to ask that from whose side he is going to fight. So they went to Krishna's palace, and Duryodhan reached there first. And because he was, very egoistic, Krishna was that time taking the rest. So he didn't wake him up, but he stood by his head. And then Arjun came after a few minutes, and he saw Duryodhan standing there, but he went and stood close to Krishna's lotus feet. Now Krishna woke up after some time, and then he first saw Arjun, and then he also saw Duryodhan standing next to his head. And then he asked, so why have you both come here? So they said, Prabhu, now the battle is going to start. We want to know from whose side you are going to fight. So Krishna said, well, Arjun came first, so I'm going to first give him the option to decide. So, and what were the two options? Now Duryodhan said, I came first. So he said, no, sorry. Krishna said, I saw Arjun first, even though Duryodhan said, I came first, so I should have the first right to ask. So now Krishna gave two options. He said that either you can have me, and if you have me, I will not fight, right? I will not even pick up a weapon. But, or you can have my Narayani Sena. So his army was called Narayani army. Huge, huge army. I won't go into the explanation how huge it was. So some say that it was 10 million warriors in his army. So now what did Arjun choose? Arjun chose Krishna to be on his side with no weapons. And Duryodhan in his mind thought, Arjun is foolish. If Krishna is not going to even pick up a weapon, what's the point of having him? So he was very happy that Arjun foolishly did not take the Krishna's army. I get to keep the army, and that's what I really want. So see, this is where the difference is in love. Arjun is the devotee. He has love for Krishna. He knows who Krishna is. Duryodhan was also seeing Krishna, but he did not know that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And just by him being on his side, the success and all, everything will be on his side. So therefore, he's saying that our eternal function is divine love, because without love, we cannot even recognize the Supreme Lord. And he says, therefore, the constitutional function of the jiva is service to Krishna. And then he explains that the two conditions of the jivas are liberated state and the conditioned state. So in the liberated state are those who are in the spiritual world. They are completely in the spiritual realm, and they have no connection with the mundane matter. As I was explaining earlier, they don't even have any knowledge of the material existence. But however, in that pure condition, he's still an infinitesimal entity. So then he explains that jiva can undergo a change in a condition because he has the quality of minuteness that we've already discussed. But Krishna does not undergo any change of condition, for his very nature is that he is infinite. So Krishna is called Achyut. He does not ever fall from his position. And in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says in chapter 4, verse 6, and I'll just quickly share this verse. And he says, Ajo api san avyayatma bhutanam ishvara api san. He says that Aja means that I am unborn. Avyay Atma. Avyay Atma means unchangeable, meaning that I never transform, I never change, I never come under the influence of Maya. Bhutanam Ishvara Apisan. I am the source, I am the controller of all the living entities. And then in the previous verse, he says, Bahuni me avatitani janmani tav charjuna tani ham ved sarvani na tvam ved parantapa. That both you and me have many, many incarnations, because Krishna also comes many times. And he says, you have also taken many births, but you have forgotten all of them. I have not forgotten anything. Why? Because he does not come under the influence of illusions, or never forgets. Whereas the living entity forgets because of the influence of illusion. So he says further in this response to this question that that Krishna is supreme, completely pure and eternal, whereas the jiva by his essential constitution is minute, apart, liable to contamination, subject to repeated change. So he says that even though the unadulterated spiritual function of the jiva is also great, undivided, and pure, everlasting, but because he is atomic and incomplete and impure, he can become like incomplete, because that is also because of his atomicity. And then when he is contaminated by involvement with Maya, his true nature is perverted, and he becomes impure, bereft of shelter, and oppressed by mundane happiness and distress. So he says that Jiva's course of material existence comes into effect as soon as he forgets his attitude of service to Krishna. So he is giving a little bit gist of what he had explained before, because after this, he's going to explain the three types of ego, the three types of abhiman. So he was just giving the essence from the previous chapter as well, because based on this, he's going to explain what are the three different types of ego or the abhiman that the living entity has, and how do they manifest at different times. So with this, we will stop. It is exactly 9 o'clock. So if anyone has any questions from what we just discussed in chapter 2 or chapter 1.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Didi.
So my question is actually with the previous part, like when eternal nature of jiva is given when like they are constituted, when the object is constituted. So when the living being is constituted, so he is given that eternal nature, that is a spiritual nature. So how come then we are caught up in that conditioned state? I mean, I did not get this. Because to go in the conditioned state, we should have those impressions from the previous life or something like that, false ego and all that. But when I am constituted, I am totally spiritual. So how am I taking that decision to go to the material world?
So Bhaktivinoda Thakur will explain this later also in the later chapters. But at this point, see, again, because it is hard to explain in our material realm the start of this event, right? So that's why he says there's no history of this. But the understanding is that when the jiva, even though he was constituted such that he is eternally a servant of Krishna, that is his eternal nature, but because of aversion, right? So just think of it, and this is just again given to explain, right? As a material example, that let's say you are given, there is a choice you have to go right or left, and you decided for some reason, because on the right hand side it seemed that you have to do a lot of sacrifices, you have to surrender to someone, and you felt on the left hand side you had an option to enjoy more and to become your own Ishvara. So imagine if there was a time like this where you had these two options, and you, because the point is the living entity, because it is in quality same as Krishna, has independent choice. Right? That is the only thing, one thing that the Lord does not interfere with, that independent and decision. So we, for whatever reason, decided that we like the left side because there it seemed very attractive and we had the ability to control and enjoy at our free will. So we chose the left side, and because of that we came into the material world. So this is where it starts, and from there the impressions, that's when the first life begins, and then we try to enjoy, and to do that enjoyment we commit all kind of activities, sinful and sometimes pious, and the karma bank starts getting these credits and debits then, and one life after another life, till we get to the point where we develop what is called nirguna shraddha, transcendental faith, and start engaging in devotional activities which don't have reaction. So this is, it is difficult to conceive, right? Because we can't conceive of a time that this would have all started, and we don't have any what to talk of our memory of something that happened millions of lifetimes ago. We don't even remember our previous life. But that is how we should understand that we had a choice and we made that choice.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? So once again, thank you everyone for joining. Next 2 Sundays, we will not have the class on Sunday because now the month of Kartik is going to begin. And in Houston, we have many programs on the weekends. So we will have this class. I will still send out if anyone, but prefer on Mondays. So hopefully everyone can join, and we can also do an half an hour earlier on Mondays. So it's convenient for everyone. But I will still send out a quick, survey if you can respond. But we will not have it next Sunday. We will have it on the Monday for the next 2 classes. Okay. Thank you everyone. Hare Krishna, God Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.